Well, welcome back to GPS today. So if you're new to us, God's Prophetic Surprise, we're going through the book of Revelation, and we're happy you found us. Spend half an hour with us. Get a Bible or get your phone out, and we're going to leap right into Revelation chapter 6. So Dr. Jon Paulien from Loma and Pastor Sara Colon. As we tape this, you know, usually we're coming off the trip or going somewhere. She's the one this time going to Brazil.
Woohoo.
Thursday.
Yes.
So 29 of our young people from Garden Grove and a few adults going down the Amazon River. Mm-hmm. Thursday night, you'll be on the Amazon, right?
Yep.
Wow. Anyway, God bless.
That's on my bucket list. I definitely, you know, trying to wangle an invitation to Manaus or something.
Yeah, well, you should be coming with us.
That's where they're going.
Yeah.
That's where we're going.
So anyway, God bless. So get a Bible out, and we're ready to go with Revelation chapter 6. But that's a quick question just to get us started, and then let's leap into the passage. I went to a Dodger game Sunday night.
Boo.
Three of us, and all in our 60s, three pastors. We were friends 40-some years ago. We were all in the seminary together. When we were in the seminary, the Dodgers here were in the World Series both years. We would all get I had the color TV. We would all sit and watch. And so we called each other, and they said, hey, let's get together. We had such a good time. But we were behind, and then we got into extra innings. And finally, in the 11th inning, we're behind a run. We come up to bat. We get a couple guys on base. 50,000 people are still there. And a kid comes up who has never been in the majors before. His line on the screen is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. This is his first at-bat in the majors. All 50,000 of us are standing because it's 2 outs, 2 guys on. If he gets a hit, it's a walk-off hit. If he doesn't get a hit, we walk home sad. It's that moment. And he gets a couple strikes, and he hits a ball down the line, and he runs, and these 2 guys come running around, just misses the tag, and we win. And the whole dugout races out there, and there's a pile, and there's the Gatorade on him, and his mother was there, his father was there, his fiance is there, his best friend is there, and he's got 1 hit out of 1. It's a walk-off hit. And 50,000 people are really happy.
That's incredible.
You know, and you just walk out of the stadium, and it's great.
Why doesn't that happen when I'm at games? That's what I want to know.
And it did happen many times. We had bases loaded, and our best hitters at plate, and out after out after out. Mm-hmm. And my question is, we have these moments in Revelation where it does not look good. We have horsemen and bad stuff happening. Is there a happy moment coming? You know, can we be really sure? Can we tell whoever's watching? Yes, it's going to turn around at the end, and there's going to be a guy come up who's going to do a walk-off, and we're all going to be happy, and we're going to have this pile in the field of everybody celebrating. Or is it going to be really sad? And it's going to be these guys who win. And how do we know?
Well, Dan, I think something you said, maybe even without realizing it, is the thing that really struck me in that story. You said, we were behind. We won.
Yes.
You had nothing to do with it. Your bald head never touched the field.
Your bald head.
But you identified with that.
Yes.
It wasn't your victory, but it became yours. And I think that's what Revelation is all about. Revelation is trying to tell us, we're going to describe reality as it is, and it's ugly. But the good news is that the winning team is the one that you're on. Even if your contribution may simply be to cheer, you're still on the winning team.
Amen.
And when the game is over, you can run into the center of the field and pile on and get the Gatorade dumped on you, even though you didn't have much to do with it.
A lot to do with it.
You know, and the beauty of the gospel is that it is something we can all embrace. Every human being needs to have the sense that they're part of something bigger than themselves. That's what Sarah's doing with these kids in Brazil. Wants them to see the huge needs of the world and also the huge reach of God's people, that they're out there doing significant things in the real world where it's needed. And when you realize you're part of something way bigger than yourself, there's meaning and there's purpose and there's joy in that playing games or buying stuff just can never compete with.
That's true.
But you're still convinced, after 60-some years in this, after many years in New York, you're at Loma Linda, there's probably a few people that die at Loma Linda every single day, right? You're still convinced that someday there's going to be a happy ending to all this after the seals and all these martyrs crying out, how long is this going to go on? Someday we're going to get to the seventh seal and we're going to win.
I think there's two things. First of all, the Bible gives an accurate diagnosis of where we are. It paints reality as it is. It's ugly at times. People say, why is that garbage in the Bible? It's ugly stuff, violence and all kinds of stuff. Because the Bible portrays things as they are. It's a clear diagnosis of what we actually experience. Number two, I don't see any way out of that mess by human effort. And therefore, the gospel is the only way I know of to fix that mess. When human beings are drawn outside of themselves and look at God and look at the cross, that's when real change happens. The only change that's ever been effective in my life is stuff that God did, even when I didn't ask him. The life change that comes in response to the gospel is real. So those are the two things that cause me to take this seriously. The diagnosis is correct, and if that remedy doesn't work, there isn't any. So I'm gonna stake my doubts, stake my uncertainties on the only remedy that I know of that can possibly work.
Yeah. I think what I like about that analogy in the context of Revelation and just religion in general is actually the fact that even if you don't have the, history or even like the status to be the one that does that winning hit, like you have the opportunity, and I think that's huge. I think a lot of people miss out on that opportunity because they don't think that they have the track record to be the one that goes and says something or does something. And I think that's where within spirituality and our belief in God is that every person has that opportunity. It's just a matter of them, stepping up to the plate and actually doing it. And
he talked about it. He's been there 3 days. He's been in the locker room for 3 days, but he knew he was coming up to a walk-off moment, and he said, "My family's here. I'm gonna try to hit it hard, and maybe it'll happen. It might not, but it might. And so I'm gonna do the best I can with this moment." And he ends up with the one of the 25 that gets it done. And it could be any of us that has a part to play with all of it. I guess one more question would be, why do we have to wait for the extra innings? Good if God is going to come through and get the final hit. Couldn't we do it a little sooner? Before we go through a divorce or before we have to have cancer, we have a lady who retired and a month later got pancreatic cancer. I was in Hawaii. Sara calls me and said, "Did you hear, Pastor Dan?" She went to Philippines with me last month. It was her big retirement bucket list experience. Never been on a trip before in her life. Had such a good time. And comes back, has some pain, cancer. Stage 4, already metastasized. And you say, couldn't Jesus have come back here? Yeah. Any quick answer to that before we go to the text?
How do you answer that, Sara? Yeah.
So, I don't know. I was a clinical chaplain for a really long time, and I think I've always struggled with that timeline concept because I think it's really hard to explain to people why bad things happen or why things happen when they do. But I think that's where, one, faith comes in, but also where just the reality is that there's a bigger timetable at play than the one that we live in. And sometimes we get in our little cylinder and we think that this is the only space that is being affected by things. And it's really hard to look beyond that. But I mean, it's one of those things where I don't think there is a good explanation. I don't think we can say that this is a detriment to the character of God. I don't think this is something that we can say is her fault. No matter what, it's one of those just unexplained, really awful situations where
God isn't the only player in the game. There's other stuff going on, and he has to work with all of it.
Right.
I sent someone, you better get your answer ready because there's a young chaplain here getting his training here at Loma Linda whose parents are in our church. And in his time there, he's had 6 people die that he was visiting. And he's struggling. And they asked me, staff, I said, we have a chaplain on our staff whose their specialty is death and dying. So look out for that.
Oh,
Elizabeth
good.
and Carlos.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, Revelation chapter 6. Here we go, starting with verse 3, the second seal. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. Excuse me. So we're talking about the seals. We have certainly talked a lot about it. Your idea is that this is the rejection of the gospel. Chronologically, after the early church, the conquest and the great victories, then there begins to be this reaction. You want to pick it up from there? You had some other Old Testament background you wanted to get to?
Yeah. Well, when you read this text, on the surface, it looks military. You got swords in here, you got people killing each other, taking peace from the earth. It sounds like the Middle East, the way things are today. I just saw this morning an article in the New York Times on Mosul after the invasion, and just devastating to see people who lived through all that, women, children, bodies everywhere, ruins and wreck and so on. It's horrible what war does. What this particular text is saying, I think, though, is not military. It's saying that all the division, all the conflict, all the fighting among human beings are the result of a rejection of the gospel. Now, that may sound crazy to a person who's not used to the scriptures, but it's because the gospel tells us we can't do it. We have to rely on somebody bigger than ourselves. It's already been done by Jesus Christ. It takes our focus away from ourselves and puts it elsewhere. And just a couple of texts here. Isaiah 26, verse 3. Old Testament has a gospel too. And people like Paul said that frequently. God preached the gospel in the Old Testament too. Isaiah 26, verse 3. You will keep in perfect peace him whose mind is steadfast because he trusts in you. I have learned in this life, and as I said, this may be counterintuitive to some of our viewers, but I have learned in this life that I only really have peace when I trust in God. When all the bad stuff that happened in the past, when all the bad stuff that could happen in the future, and I put it in God's hands, I trust that God can handle it, and that even if he decides not to handle it, he's got a good reason. When you trust God to that degree, that peace becomes real. These people in the second seal are taking peace from the earth. That's the opposite of this text. Isaiah 57 comes at it the opposite way. What happens to those in this text that we've been looking at? Isaiah 57, 20 to 21. Well, verse 19, context. Praise on the lips of the mourners in Israel. Peace, peace to those far and near, says the Lord, and I will heal them. So God, there's an offer of peace. And frankly, in a stressed out world, I need that peace. I mean, even working for God's people, working at a place like Loma, it can consume your life. So many issues, so many needs, so much stress, so many things that need to get done. Then the opposite, verse 20, but the wicked are like a tossing sea, which cannot rest, whose waves cast up mire and mud. There is no peace, says my God, for the wicked. So the fundamental diagnosis of Scripture, which I believe is being echoed in these horsemen, is that there is no peace apart from the plan of God. Apart from the gospel, there's no genuine peace. Things may go smoothly for a bit, things may seem to be okay, but then they go sour again. Genuine peace comes trusting in God. One last little piece is the Gideon story. We all learned that as little kids. Fun story, sneaking around in the dark, got pictures there, you make lots of noise, you show lights, you freak people out. Great children's story, But the interesting thing about it is Gideon does not win the battle because those 300 guys are worth 300,000. He wins the battle because the enemy starts fighting among themselves in the dark. When you don't have the gospel, you end up fighting with each other. It's even true in a marriage. I hope you get to experience that soon. The conflict in a marriage, in even the best of marriage. And the conflict comes because of what? What do you think, Sarah?
Selfishness.
Selfishness, right?
Yeah.
Because each of us doesn't put the other one first. You know, I heard a counselor once say, if more than 50% of your thoughts are about your wife, you don't have a problem with pride. But when you're thinking mostly about yourself and hardly about your spouse, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And so everything they do becomes irritating. You know, if you're the woman in the family, every sock on the floor becomes a major irritation. But if the selfishness is gone, if it's yielded to God, then some of those things just don't irritate anymore.
Are the lines black and white? Is God's side always peace, and it's the horsemen against peace? Or are the lines blurred sometimes? Or are there times when God's side legitimately takes peace away? Or is it always peace is good and no peace is bad?
Well, Jesus in Matthew 10 said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. So how does that all fit?
Now, you can't ask, I ask you.
Yeah. Well, I think the point in the second is that when the gospel is rejected, people are left to their own selfish devices.
Well, and if you look at the definition of gospel to a lot of theologians, and kind of where I lean more towards in my hippie way, is that, you know, the gospel, according to Jesus, was, what are the greatest commandments? What do I, decree to you, basically? And it's to love God, love each other. And so if you have ultimate love going through the gospel, then there's a difference. People reject love sometimes just as much as they accept it. And so I think that there's a constant challenge there with like the definition of even just gospel and what is peace, because I think a lot of communities won't even agree on that. So by treating people with love, sometimes you'll make them just as angry, and that creates chaos and takes away the peace, because they want you to react. They want you to like.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know, I was just thinking.
But are there times when even God's side has to take peace away from people? Or is it always wrong to take peace from people?
I don't think it's always wrong. I think that being uncomfortable sometimes in a situation helps motivate you to handle it.
We had a treasurer one time in a church in Chicago that had no training, did not know how to keep books. The auditor's opinion was, we cannot make an opinion because there's nothing here. It was a disaster in every way. After struggling with it for a few months, I inherited it. The finance committee said, Pastor Dan, you have to fire him. I went to his house. Before I got the words out, he told me that he and his wife were pregnant with twins, 27, 28 years old. I couldn't do it. Everything in my spirit said, I cannot do this. I went back to the committee and said, I can't do this to these people. I can't take peace away. I'm going to destroy their lives if I take his only source of income away when they got twins coming. And he said, you have to do it. The church needs it. So here you have the church and its survival and its viability versus taking peace away from people. And I'm asking, is there a time when you have to? Is there a time? I know I have a family. The young man in the house is stealing from them to feed a heroin habit. Is there a time to say, you can't be here anymore?
Well, and I think that there is a time for accountability. I mean, not to be a crazy person, but I mean, I think accountability is a huge thing, and I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of it. I mean, as a child, if my parents, me as a child, if my parents didn't follow through and hold me accountable for some of my actions, it would be I would be a ridiculous adult right now. Like, there's no way I would have been who I needed this.
So what's the generalizable principle? The Romans says, as much as it has to do with you, live in peace with all. Can you take peace away from people? Can you send a young person away from a school and just remove them? Can you fire somebody? Can you use the police and kill somebody or, do some bad things to them? What are these lines clear? 4 horsemen do these terrible things. They take peace away. Jesus is a God of peace. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Otherwise, we would fight.
Yeah.
Are the lines clear, or is there some overlap where there are some God-honoring times when it is honoring God to take peace away from people and use force and use power and use control?
I think what's scary about that is if humans get too involved with thinking that they have the right to remove peace, it's not going to go well. That's where my concern comes in.
Well, look,
because the Gideon story is they did not do anything of damage.
No.
To very bad people.
No, that's right. And in this second seal, it is not God that's taking peace from the earth. It's the rejection of the gospel that's taking peace from the earth. And in Isaiah, those texts, if you trust in God, there's peace. But for the wicked, there is no peace.
Should we trust in God to handle it? He'll find a way. In the Gideon story, just trust in God, shout for God, and he will find a way to remove the enemy.
Well, but they still had a role to play.
They had a role to play.
God made the plan. God produced the outcome, but still they had a role to play.
But they didn't have to take the peace away themselves.
No, they didn't.
Is that the generalizable principle?
I think wherever possible.
That's the ideal.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible does portray God at times as intervening to save people. I mean, supposing that somebody breaks into a house and is killing and raping your family, would you not, and God is standing there with a baseball bat in his hand, would you want him to act? Or would you say, oh, you were mean to this guy. He had a rough childhood and everything. Now you went and bashed him in the head. What's wrong with you? You see, I guess you could say it's not easy being God. Because when you don't intervene, you're blamed. When you do intervene, you're blamed. I think God does sometimes intervene, but he does that to deliver. He does that to save people. He does that to minimize, ultimately. It's maybe not the best illustration. The Hiroshima thing is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing, and I hope nuclear weapons never, ever get used again. But the reality is the estimate was that an invasion of Japan would cost 1 million American lives, not to mention countless Japanese lives. This horrible, horrible thing shook everybody so much they said, we can't have this anymore, let's just make peace. And sometimes I think God intervenes because it's the only way to get our attention.
Yeah.
But the core problem with violence is rejection of the gospel. Why then, in a religion that's grounded in nonviolence, and when I say that, I mean the cross, why has that religion been so violent through history?
Could we justify it? We think this is right. This has to be done. Paul thought he was doing exactly the right thing, going out and killing people in the name of God.
And I think this is just humanity. Like, we don't know how to take things into our own hands and do it right. You know what I mean? Like, we constantly think we understand something and then we just mess it up along the way. I mean, we don't understand what pure, healthy love is. So, like, when we talk about gospel, we don't get that. And I think people are so inward focused because that's all we know. We only know how we're feeling, and then we base everything off of that. And that creates chaos, and that takes away peace from that. And so I think that's where religion's such a dodgy thing, because it's hard to hold people accountable because you don't want to be a dictator, right? And you don't want to be defining God in such small terms, but at the same time, people don't grow. So, like, where is the balance? Absolutely. But also, I think peace is something that is different to each person. And
well, talk about accountability. I mean, that's what our world church leaders think that needs to happen right now on the women's issue. Mm-hmm. Some people don't follow policy, therefore something needs to happen.
Yeah.
So the word accountability can be a cover for some seemingly un-Christ-like control.
yeah.
And someone who was at the meeting said to me, Pastor Dan, someone from another country said, you Americans are not going to win, and use this gesture. I said, where's that gesture in the Jesus? Do you see Jesus using this gesture? You're not going to win this one. And I said, what does the Spirit of Jesus mean when we're going to act? Or is this seal behavior, horseman behavior?
And I think to answer your question, it's just self-focus and selfishness.
Well, Dan, I think And just exactly what Sarah was saying, there's bad behavior on both sides in every church fight. And one thing that's really sobering to me is for an organization, a religious organization, to truly follow the gospel, it would need to have the same self-abnegation that Jesus had.
Wow.
But how does an institution do that? How does an institution put others first? Can you imagine a religion that actually says, we are here to serve people of other religions because God has called us to be the witness of self, put yourself aside and live for the benefit of others? Would that religion even survive? You know, he says, you know, don't give your money to us. Give it to the poor and stuff like that, because we are here to show
Gandhi
the
and
foot
Martin
washing,
Luther King changed
you know,
a lot of things by using that model.
Whenever you have a religion, you have a tension between two things. On the one side, religion is necessary because it provides for efficiency. It provides for a way to talk about God and to spread that around the world. You kind of need a little organization to do that. But the minute you organize, you plant the seeds of something that grows against the gospel.
That's right.
And so,
exactly right.
so every religion, including my own, has to wrestle with this challenge. How do I balance the need to organize, to protect this whatever it is, this living being almost, this social organization? How do I protect it so it can do the mission without turning it into a monster that turns on the mission? And that's happened way too many times.
Well, the
in history.
wineskins become brittle and can't hold the wine anymore.
Yeah, I mean, once we as a church are just about our own survival, then we have walked away from the very gospel that we claim to preach.
That's great stuff,
So it's
John.
a tension that we have to be aware of, and I'm not. I'm not speaking rebellious or anything like that. We got to have some organization.
That's right.
We have to be able to come together and talk about it and agree to disagree on some stuff. Okay, that's the way it has to be. But we also have to be aware that the genetics of religious organizations is a downhill slide away from the original mission and towards self-preservation,
Amen.
which is the opposite of the gospel.
It's true.
We're going to write that down and mail that out to everywhere, John. Well said. Really well said, John, and I thank you for it. And you know, we're going to have to go on to the next chapter here in our next show, and the next seal. But I hope that you have heard this today, and I hope that we have heard that appeal. It's not just the world church or churches, it's families, it's schools. This tension of control, and someone's not doing it right, and I have to use control and power in order to get things done right, versus servanthood and peace and Jesus and the Spirit. That tension is all the time.
And Dan, I'm saying we're talking both sides in any church conversation. It's not just one-sided.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And we have to deal with it. Anyway, we've got to be done. Thank you for finding us today. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. It's real. It's alive. It's where we all live, in every church and every family. Blessed will be with you again. Be with us for the third seal, Revelation 6.